All right, so Barton and I are going to draft potential playoff teams, and we're going to go 8 rounds. So there'll be 16 teams picked. If your team makes the playoff, you get a point. Seems pretty simple. We're each going to take 8 teams. It'll be a snake draft format, and we discussed beforehand. Barton wants picks 2, 3, and then 6, 7. So I get picks 1, 3, 3, 4, or excuse me, 1, 4, 5, etc. After each pick, we'll kind of discuss and say, yeah, I think that was like an obvious pick there, or perhaps I don't know what you're thinking there. Maybe I have this team a little bit lower on the board. Probably not a whole lot of hate because, you're taking the top teams of college football. And for a tiebreaker, we will use, like if we both end up with 2 or we both end up with 1. First of all, if we both end up with only 1 team, then we should probably quit our jobs. But if we end up with 2 each, which is possible, then we will go to a tiebreaker of teams to make New Year's Six bowls. So basically the access bowls there as a tiebreak. And we should probably do a little kind of charity bet on this. The loser has to pay, I don't know, what do you want to say, $100 to the winner's charity?
Works for me.
All right, cool.
What's the lowest ranked preseason team to make the playoffs? Was it Oklahoma a few years ago when they were ranked like 16th? Do you know
I think that's where was that Michigan State team ranked that got crushed by Bama?
That's a good question. I don't know what they were ranked.
Because Washington would have been pretty high.
I feel like the Oklahoma, maybe the first year they got in, was the lowest ranked team, and I want to say it was 16. So our 16 picks, you would hope, would cover all possible options. So hopefully, like you said, we're not stuck with 1 each in here. That would be, hey, that'd be a hell of a season. That'd be fun.
No doubt. So. I thought you were going to ask me, what's the lowest amount to charity that we can get away with without people giving us hell for?
Yeah. No, I wasn't going to say that. But, look, I got diapers coming up in July. I think 100 I can deal with. And hopefully we still got jobs and everything by then. We'll be good to go.
All right. So a little NFL draft news. All right. So leading off here with pick number 1, I don't think this is going to draw a whole lot of criticism. Team Bud Elliott selects the Clemson Tigers. Clemson, who made the playoff last several years in a row, and they are led by Trevor Lawrence and Dabo Swinney. And if you're listening to this podcast, you probably have a pretty good feel for what Clemson is. Clemson also got 9 spring practices in, which is more than most of the teams on this list. So I feel pretty good about taking Clemson here. Their schedule is pretty favorable, and I don't really see any game in which they'll be favored by less than double digits. So if you get that kind of recipe from a Power 5 conference, I think you got to go with it.
Was there any hesitation?
Not really. I thought about it and was like, I'd probably lay 1 to 3 on them making the playoff.
All right, so let me ask you this. Had we been, if this exercise was not about a playoff berth, but instead was about you get 16 chances to pick the national champion, would you have still gone Clemson with your first pick?
Yeah, but I think the gap is smaller, right? Like making it and winning it are different things, but in order to win it, you do have to make it. So a major component of winning it is, obviously that's kind of a truism. A major component of winning it is making it. But I think because Clemson, in my mind, is so overwhelmingly the number 1, I think I would still go with Clemson for my national title pick if I had to pick just one team.
Well, and also I think the Clemson deal too is they still, like every other school we talk about for the most part, is going to have to survive conference play. Clemson, you can just, they're just pencil them in. They've locked up that. They're the ACC champ. I think like that would be pretty shocking to me if they didn't win the ACC. All right, so we ready for
Barton's up for 2.
All right. So I guess it doesn't matter whether I just for the sake of my board, I think I'm going to actually go Alabama at 2. I think the big question obviously is quarterback. I think Mac Jones is good enough. I think Bryce Young, I sure would have liked to have had him get a spring ball session in. Had he gotten spring practice in, maybe I'd be even more confident. This feels a little bit like the year when Jalen Hurts didn't start the season as the starter, right? It was it was that crowd that he was playing behind. Like I think that.
Oh yeah, the game in Dallas.
Yeah, he was Blake Barnett was the starter that year, maybe.
Yeah, it was Barnett. Didn't they have like 3 guys who they were actually looking at?
Yeah, there was a whole crowd, and Jalen Hurts showed up and just kind of took that thing over.
You know who they played in that first game, right? In Dallas.
USC, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they opened again this year against USC.
There you go. Like that trivia. So I like Alabama here because there's a little bit of yes, they got to go through the SEC, but there is a little bit of just don't count these guys out. Like all of a sudden they have all this motivational material. Bryce Young can be that guy. I think they returned a bunch of dudes. I think Dylan Moses coming back on defense is a total game changer. They might have been in the playoff last year if Dylan Moses hadn't gotten hurt. So Alabama's always a safe pick. I don't think I have to dig too deep into it. But I do think that I've got kind of a hunch that this is a year that Alabama's got a pretty good shot at winning it all once again. Number 3, you can probably guess. What's your guess on my number 3 here?
You better be taking the Buckeyes.
Yeah, you got to go Ohio State. Justin Fields, quarterback, loaded roster. They've recruited well enough. Ryan Day, second year. This is going to be maybe the most talented roster in all of college football. And I think when you have a roster that talented, you've always got a shot. Now, granted, they've got a tougher road than, say, a Clemson. And I just still think Ohio State is probably our best bet out of the Big Ten and probably the most talented team in the country.
I got to tell you, if we had flipped picks, right, and you had 1 and I had 2, 3, I would have done the exact same thing, and I'm guessing you would have also done the exact same thing that I did in taking Clemson 1. With Bama, I love the floor of Mac Jones and then maybe the ceiling of Bryce Young, right? Like you have that confidence that, all right, this team can get to the playoff with Mac Jones, provided that defense is as good as we think it probably is going to be. And I think it'll be a really strong bounce back year for the defense. On 24/7 Sports, I wrote my 1 prediction for each SEC team. Like I know you wrote your 1 prediction for each Big Ten team. And my prediction for Bama was that their defense was going to be the best since at least 2017. Because they've had 2 years in a row where they had like a good to very good defense, but not that Nick Saban classic, Bama style defense. And I think this will be a really strong bounce back for them. And their schedule is, they do have to play Georgia, but they get Georgia early in Tuscaloosa. A&M comes to Tuscaloosa. Auburn comes to Tuscaloosa. Their 1 road game is LSU. And I feel like LSU will probably take somewhat of a step back this year. With Ohio State, that's probably the only change I would have made. I probably would have taken Ohio State 2 if I really had to do an order on it, and then Bama 3. But it's pretty close. Ohio State has that trip to Penn State, which is difficult. But is there anybody who has an argument to have a clearly better roster than them? I don't think so. You might say, hey, I like this roster a little bit better, but nobody's like a clear better roster than the Buckeyes right now. So I think that's exactly what I would have done with my picks, man.
Yeah, and I think the points you made on Alabama's defense is important because when you look at the way the roster, the way they've recruited over the last couple cycles, because it was so interesting to me when I think back at one of the best Alabama classes of all time was that 2017 class. It was Tua, Najee Harris, Alex Leatherwood, Jedrick Wills, Henry Ruggs, Devontae Smith. I think Xavier McKinney. Is Xavier McKinney that class? It was just loaded.
I think so.
And that class ultimately won 1 national championship, which was their freshman year. And in retrospect, when you think back at that class, it was very un-Alabama class because it was quarterback and skill players largely. They did, like I said, they have 2 potential first-round draft picks off as a tackle, but it wasn't this class that was just loaded with front 7 talent. I think they've been recruiting over the last couple years in a way that perhaps this year, like you said, Bud, they get back to having a front seven that can really impose their will on another team. And that's a little bit of where the confidence lies in Alabama being bounced back isn't even the right term, because it was still potentially, a lot of people still thought they were a top 4 team in the country last year, but this could be a year where they're back to their dominant self, with no slip ups.